Well, if you are a church and you're wondering why, how do I respond? Because there's so much to do. And I thought just jot a few notes down so that you would know as a congregation what you should be thinking about doing. Because this response is probably different than any others, and where you invest your resources is really going to matter. Just to set it up, I want you to think about it like this, that in Indonesia a few years ago, there was a tsunami. You remember that? While everybody was reporting and focused on the earthquake that had happened, following the earthquake was a tsunami. And when that tsunami occurred, people were not prepared for it. And so that was a huge concern. I want to challenge you that while we are responding to the earthquake, that you began to think about figuring out how we respond to the tsunami. Because even as we speak, contingency plans are being made for the case of the tsunami. How do we feed the hungry, the most vulnerable, the feeble within our communities? Where will those people be? And how do you make sure that the resources that you have are maximized? And when do you deploy the resources that you have? Because in a while you won't be able to send money to buy food. And so what I'm suggesting is that you as a congregation think more so about having the ability to respond as a community. What can we do to build the response ability in the areas that are going to be hit hardest? And if we are data driven, and that's what we've got to be, where are the areas that the mass spreading of this thing can get out of control? And it's going to be if we follow the data, it will be in our low, moderate income and rural communities where they have the least capacity to respond. And then with the unemployment rate being what it's going to be, if this thing lasts, and that's what we're talking about, not the earthquake, but the tsunami. If this lasts 3, 4, 6 months, then we've got to have, as a community of faith, a 6-month plan to respond to what's happening. And in that 6-month plan, it's going to be think about Joseph. He had to build the barns and the others before the famine hit. We, in these next 14 days, have to build the farms and the like that are needed before the 7 years of famine hit, or the 7 months of famine hit. So this is so very important that we do this. And so here's what we need to know, and I thought I put it in writing, so I thought that it would be of some help to you all. This comes from talking with people that are working with FEMA, the state EMA, the county EMA, and some of your normal responders, people in other countries, on what they faced and where we're going. And as a church, this is what I think you need to know, or we need to know, to make sure that we have the response ability, or the ability to respond now and then in the time of famine. So here's a quick overview of kind of where we are, if you were wondering. Just think about it like this. This is a bulletin that we put together at Mission, Alabama. How do you prepare your church, your organization? One of the things to do is that you would know the difference in this impending crisis. Usually a FEMA disaster covers 1 to 10 counties in a couple of states. This coronavirus covers every county in 50 states. That's what's at stake. Now, will every county be hit? There's a good chance, but some will be hit harder than others. So usually what happens during a disaster, FEMA sends a team to these various areas, and FEMA does not have that capacity to respond to a national crisis. So that means that a lot more things are going to happen locally. Usually the feds send financial resources. The feds have not sent any money or guaranteed any money for case management or volunteer reimbursement. Your VOADs, and that is volunteer organizations active in disaster, those that are on the front line and responding to providing relief to the people that are devastated. Those folks usually receive some type of assistance. This is different. Those won't be there. So the role of the philanthropic community of the church becomes very important, because we're going to have to fill locally some of the roles that our federal government would usually fulfill. Not all, but some. And a big part of that is going to be relief. Right here, and this is very important, disasters are usually in 3 phases. And I'm going to type this in: response. Let's see if I've got it. Boom. All right, so they're usually in 3 phases: response, relief, and recovery. So that's how we usually think about disasters: response, relief, and recovery. So if you watch Birmingham City Council, for instance, the meeting, one of the things that you saw is that they were asking for additional dollars for first responders because they anticipate overtime would go up, that kind of deal. And as we began to shut down the cities, moving down towards essential services and that kind of deal, then you're going to have to increase the police patrol. So overtime is approved, and that's normal. And then going with that, there will be some second responders if this goes for a prolonged period of time, to where you have the National Guard, and then possibly, if that's not enough, you would see the military, because the Stanford Act has been invoked during times of disaster. And so the whole goal is, especially in your high populated areas, to make sure that there's not rioting and looting and the like. So we've got first responders and then support responders that come after that come from our state, which controls the National Guard, and our federal government that controls the U.S. Army military. So that is a reality of, what will happen with a prolonged event. And then the next area that we look at is the relief. And this is where faith community, NGOs, non-governmental organizations, the VOAD, volunteer organizations active in disasters, civic organizations, professional organizations, social, Divine Nine organizations, and the like, where they come in. And it's their job, and it's our job to provide relief. So when we think of, and so we have to have the response ability, or the ability to respond to the need that is going to hit the community. And that's this sector right here, in which we have that response. So very important. And then we'll move into the last phase, which will be the recovery phase. And so the recovery phase, in helping our businesses and the like, you see SBA loans, federal bailout, and utilities being deferred on case-by-case basis for our businesses, because our small business sector will be hit by this thing. It's already hit, and there's going to be a domino effect, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But the other place where we continue the relief in green as churches and other non-governmental organization is a long-term recovery relief for those that have been affected by this plague or this outbreak. Now, it's very important for us to know that a long-term recovery strategy will be needed for you as a church, because the people within your congregations are going to be hit, and we're going to explain that a little later. And for those that are losing jobs and the like, it's going to take a while before the small business sector comes back on board. There will be restaurants and small businesses that closed, that were already either behind or living with very low margin. For some, this will put under, and for some, they will not have the ability to reopen, and this will hit our unemployment as restaurants close. And what happens is it messes with the supply chain. So those that delivered the packages, those that were wholesalers and jobbers, they then began to idle down, and the people working there go out of jobs. And then those people who deliver the food across road, the trucking companies, those people also. So as a church, we will operate in relief and the recovery area. And even after the virus is contained, urban and rural communities will continue to be impacted from the mass unemployment that our friends in Canada say it will be upwards of 50%. So this is when the recovery phase will truly begin. So expect an additional 3 to 6 months for the need of there being a need for relief for those that are unemployed. All right. So here's what we need to know. Who is impacted? During this event, at the very beginning, if this continues on and goes on, the elderly, the disabled, and feeble will be the first at the top of the chain that will be impacted. And then the food insecure families. Now, you got to think about this through the remainder of this month. Schools throughout our county and our area, your county, your area, will continue to feed people. But then after that, what you will see is that those they're going to stop. And so the reason why they're able to continue to feed people is because many families are food insecure. So we're talking about 30% of the families in Jefferson County are food insecure. And so for that reason, the schools have money to where they've been able, for those 9 months of the year, they're able to feed the kids breakfast and lunch. In your urban cores and rural areas, they're able to feed breakfast, lunch, and dinner in those areas. When a school system gets to around 92% of kids that are qualified for free and reduced lunch, then the whole school eats free. And then what happens, we talked about the unemployed. This is the next group. The unemployed, the initial thoughts were, well, 20% will be, at a certain phase, 20% of people, the unemployment rate will go to 20%. In Canada, it went over 50% as this event prolongs out. And so businesses and their supply chains will be idled. So when you hear that the automobile assembly plants are closing down, then you remember we found out during the 2008 downturn from President Obama, we found out that, remember, the supply chain was a huge thing. It wasn't just saving Chrysler or whoever, but the people that supply them, which is a huge industry. It's a domino effect. If you want additional information, just email me, Fortson@leadalabama.org. Now, here comes the next part. How are they impacted? How are these folks right here impacted by what's going on? And I'm going to see if I can make that just a little bigger for us, right? How are they impacted by what's happening? All right, so the elderly, the disabled and feeble, the food insecure, the unemployed. One, it creates a need for food, accessing food, a need for medication, getting their medicine, income, purchasing. Might not be a money issue, but the ability to purchase, and then transportation. And so in our urban and rural communities, transportation is already an issue. And many of these areas already are an issue. So this is going to be our most vulnerable that as a church we're going to have to figure out how to take care of. And when you figure out how to take that up, we're going to have a kind of a triage model for the church. Our Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and uttermost parts of the world. How are we going to take care as we look from here to here? How are we going to, as a church, be able to deal with this in our Jerusalem first, which is within our congregation, and then within our Judea extends out to the friends, families, neighbors of those connected to our congregation, to our Samaria, the geographical area that fills in between where our friends, family, neighbors, loved ones live, that geographical area and impact of your church congregation, taking care of them, and then our to the uttermost parts of the world goes out beyond there. So as a church, you got to figure out how to respond there. If we start now in the planning just for our congregation, then we're beginning to build the infrastructure that will be needed for a great response. And there's some things that you're going to need to know in the stewardship of the resources. And that's going to be very important. But as a church and a congregation, you can begin to make plans for how are we going to meet the demand that is going to be upon our church, that's your Jerusalem, and then extend out so that our church is mobilized to meet the demands of their circles, or we empower them to give them the ability to respond through in their circles, which are the extended family, neighbors, friends, those that are around them, right? So as we continue, here's some of the things that you as a church are going to need. All right, you're going to need case management or whatever, soul care, whatever you want to call it. You're going to need it. And the reason why you're going to need it is because we've got to steward resources that are within the church and resources that are outside of the church. And I'm going to explain that, because if we don't, the burden will be too great to put it all on the church. It's just too great. You can't do it. You won't be able to manage it. So just like the burden is too great to put it all on the government, it's too great to put it all on the church. You don't have the resources. And so having someone that is a case management person, in other words, it is think about the Holy Spirit, parakleo, to come alongside of the people that are in need, becomes very important. So that case management, that brother and sister that has the capacity for administrative skills and the like, soon as the person, a rapid response, when people began to lose their job, making sure that they start the paperwork for unemployment compensation, to make sure they start the paperwork for food stamp. Very important. Make sure they understand about utilities and the deferment of the utilities. And that case manager will then have to do a needs assessment. And the reason why the needs assessment has to be done is because there are going to be some people that have needs, but it's not a financial or monetary issue, but it's a transportation issue. So that becomes very, very important. So we've talked through this with various organizations. The goal will not be to give out food and other resources as chiclets. This is not the free food time. And in ministry, sometimes it's kind of fun to be able, hey, we just want to be a blessing to everybody. No. You're going to be a blessing to everyone in different ways by the way that you respond. Because what's going to happen, donated food is going to dry up as the food source begins to dry up, and then purchase food you will have to use that sparingly. There's a good chance that there will be government food for the poor and the hurting. But here's what you want to do just as a church as you're beginning. You're going to begin probably by purchasing food to meet the need. So at that time, The goal is to do a needs assessment to see, well, Miss Smith or Brother John only needs for someone to go shopping to him. So it might be an issue of helping to assist in the purchase of food for those folks. And then you save the food that the church purchases for the most help needed folks. And so that becomes very, very important. So this is how your church is able to meet the needs. And then the next thing, part of the needs assessment and case management, right? And let me see, I'm going to read this up underneath and see if it gets it. Case management is going to become very important to assist people with rapidly obtaining the available financial assistance. This will help to keep the complete burden off of the church organization. And then donated food you give to the verified needy. And then third, purchase food you sell to those that have the resources but may not have the mobility to purchase on their own, right? And so I want you to think about this. Once you began to meet that need for your Jerusalem, and then the Judea going beyond your church membership to the circles of friends and family and neighbors, and this is what it looks like right here. Where can our church begin? Jerusalem, your congregation. Judea, the key relationships of congregational members, neighbors. Samaria, the geographical area serviced by your Jerusalem, Judea, and then the world, the city in which you serve. So you began to think about your church also doesn't have the capacity to distribute food to all that have the need when it gets beyond your Jerusalem. So when you start getting into your Judea, then what's going to happen is what's going to happen is you're going to run your people thin. So when you're doing your case management, you want to think about the fact that as you began to extend out, you want to utilize the friends and families and neighbors of some of the most feeble within your congregation, or those people that are going to have need that aren't able to come and pick up a box, that kind of deal. If you have to deliver, it's probably good to say we want about 75% pickup and maybe at the most 25% delivery. So you want to use the circles of friends and families of the people that you help as you begin to move out to your Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and othermost parts of your city. You want to use those relationships. And so you think about for those in your Jerusalem and Judea, your church will become that hub. And then as you begin to move out, you'll have to use, eventually, we'll get to the place to where we'll have a center where food is going to be distributed, let's say through FEMA and the like. You'll use your church network as a service to those centers to make sure that the same people you've been serving will have access to food. You will already have the capacity to respond if this event goes 2 to 4 to 6 months. You will have already exercised it because you have started with your Jerusalem and Judea. Right? So this is where the church begins. But what's going to happen is, eventually what's going to happen is that as the food supplies dry up and you're not able to buy food in bulk, then there will be distribution warehouses. And when those distribution warehouses come, then you will then present your network to be able to serve your Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria. So you'll already have the capacity to make sure that your people, their extended circles, and their neighbors are taken care of, because you practice it already as a church before this thing really began to grow 3 weeks down the line. So as a church, you began right now by starting with your Jerusalem and then the Judea. And you're going to do that with church resources. What's going to happen is there's going to be a shift, and the church resources will dry up. The ability to respond, or the responsibility of the church, will change. FEMA will come in, set up these warehouses for distribution, and whereas you may not have the resources, you will have the distribution network to make sure that those folks in your Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria are taken care of. So that's important for you to know, by building a responsibility in your Jerusalem, before you can take greater responsibility for your Judea, Samaria, and the city, that is how you help. So what do you do with your people? You began to mobilize within your organizations and identify those people, let's say within your church, that's your Jerusalem, that may need the help. The homebound, the feeble, and those that are, let's say, 55, 60 and above. Began to identify them and then do the case management piece to see do an assessment of what their need is. Do you have friends? Do you have family? Do you have children that can come and pick up the resources that you need, that can go and get the medicine? Mrs. Smith, I want you to think through who will be good to help you get your medicine. Well, I've got so-and-so, and then who would be a second person? And then there's so-and-so. Well, that's good. So you build in redundancy into that system, but case managing them and doing the needs assessment is going to be very important to create the distribution strategy. And then when you begin to think about your volunteers of 50 years of age and younger, you can begin doing that within your church right now. You can begin to say, okay, who are the people that will be available to be runners, to pick up packages, to drop them off, that kind of deal. Making sure that we have the gloves, the PPE that's needed to make sure that when we touch these boxes and the like, that our hands are clean and the like. When we touch a door and the like, that we have gloves. And so that's the PPE, the personal protection equipment that you need. We can help you get that, the gloves and all of that. And that's why we stay in touch. We can access the resources that you need. Remember this right here, that some researchers have said that virus will stay on a hard surface up to 72 hours. New researchers have said that it can stay alive on a hard surface, a table, something like that, a laptop, whatever, your car, a gas pump, whatever, for 30 hours. All right. So this isn't a time to be touching hard surfaces that other people touch. Going into a restaurant, that kind of deal is not what you want to do. So please know that. That's very important to know. So having the gloves and the like, it can live on cardboard boxes for up to 12 hours. So even with the cardboard boxes, even those people that are receiving those boxes, we have to teach them, train them how to use their gloves to bring that box inside, open it up, clean it out, and then put that box back outside of their house. Super important to know that. So there's going to have to be a kind of a hygiene practice, even for the delivery of and then the receiving of these goods that are in boxes, in order to slow contamination. And then also, even in our cars, our vehicles, being able to wipe them down on a regular basis as well. So here's some areas to start. If you have questions, you can email me, you can inbox me, but it is a place for your congregation to begin. There's so much more that we could tell you, but we thought that we would start here with this briefing that kind of gives you an overview of what you are going to be dealing with within your congregation, within that's your Jerusalem, within your Judea, and then within your Samaria, and that's what we talked about here, and then the uttermost parts of the city. So it's good for you to have a strategy. You need to implement this now so that you will be ready to move from your Jerusalem, then to your Judea, and then to your Samaria, and then to the othermost parts of the world, depending on your responsibility. So I hope that this is helpful. Wanted to share that with you. This is where we are going. These are the times that we are living in. And so this is the work that we have to do. We've got to make sure that we take care of those that we love in our Jerusalem, our Judea, and then Samaria, and the uttermost parts of the world. All right, look, love you. Everyone has to think about who might need help where, so that as we go, we can help as we go down the road, helping your neighbor, your friend, your loved one. God bless.